let's get our full-blown acceleration. Full-blown acceleration here. Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be doing a driving comparison between this Rebel and this TRX, and really we're going to see, does the TRX drive $35,000 better than the Rebel? But first and foremost, a huge shout out and thank you to the Dodge Ram here in Sandy for giving me some time with the Rebel. I really appreciate it and letting me compare this Rebel to my TRX. So check out their inventory in the description below, but let's get into the video. Well, let's talk about visibility before we set off here in this Rebel. So first off, visibility over the hood is pretty good. Obviously the venting there in the center does get in the way a little bit, but it's not crazy. And then here's your visibility through both of the mirrors. The trailer mirrors definitely show a ton. And then here's throughout the rest of the rear. So from a visibility standpoint, it's really good. And that all being said, let's set off with low fuel. So setting off here on the Rebel, and the thing that I noticed too is like the top portion here on the steering wheel that's like the smooth leather, where the TRX has Alcantara, is way bigger, whereas these side portions that are perforated are a lot smaller compared to the TRX. Definitely an interesting detail. But initially setting off here in the Rebel, and again, this one has a standard suspension, no air suspension, which is my preferred setup for a Rebel. I really am not a fan of the air suspension. That person had their other turn signal on, but then they were turning this way. Gotta love these Utah drivers. Anyways, actually getting up and going here into the, well, in the Rebel. Ride quality is really nice with the truck. It has this nice smooth ride quality. When you go over bumps, it really doesn't upset the truck too much. As an on-road truck, it's really nice from a suspension standpoint. And then in terms of the noise that comes through in the cabin, pretty well insulated. I feel like the trucks are actually really similar from that standpoint. There's not a huge difference. And this is not a part of this video at all, but if you happen to live in Utah and you have one of the new Defenders and you would be willing to let me review it, I'd really appreciate that. That's all I gotta say on that. But back to the Rebel. So doing this turn right here, yeah, it just feels different than the TRX. So the steering definitely feels a lot lighter compared to the TRX. And the other thing that I'm noticing with this compared to the TRX is it seems like it has a little bit more body roll, but it feels lighter also. So like the suspension isn't as like sporty, but then the front end feels so much lighter. Like it's weird. The turn in's better in some ways, but then it's also worse. It's like you get more body roll, but then you don't feel like you're heaving around so much weight like you do with the TRX. And of course you run into a bunch of traffic, but don't worry. We've got our auto stop start, which the TRX doesn't have auto stop start. So like we're saving on fuel right now, whereas in the same situation, the TRX, we are just burning through millions of years worth of decayed bacteria and fish and all this other stuff, you know, all the stuff that makes it fuel. See, normally I would go, but like you can never trust these Utah drivers with their turn signals, because I mean, you guys know how it works. See, like that person didn't even use the turn signal. I mean, it's all over the place. It's basically like a driving free-for-all here in Utah, which is sad, but I'll get back to you guys in just a moment. We are getting up and going now. We're gonna do our partial acceleration here with the Rebel. Yeah, so I mean, just getting up and going, torque is actually pretty decent. And I mean, it just gets up and moves. And remember, we are at 4,500 feet elevation, but you guys did not watch a Ben Hardy review for a partial acceleration. Let's get our full-blown acceleration and see how the Rebel does while this person's gonna pull in front of me. So we're gonna have to change lanes and, oh, no, they're still gonna pull in front of me. Let's get our full-blown acceleration. Yeah, really good from an acceleration standpoint. Sounds really nice. Decent torque as well. I mean, it just gets up and moves. And what I would say, for sure, you can feel a power difference. And when we get in the TRX, you guys will be able to see that with the acceleration. The one thing I do want to mention is this is in two-wheel drive right now, and you don't really, I mean, on dry roads like this, it hooks up really well and it doesn't slip at all. Whereas if the TRX had two-wheel drive, you would just be spinning through those tires like crazy. This just hooks up, so it's like the perfect amount of torque where you can use the power and the tires aren't gonna be spinning all over the place, which is nice. But yeah, definitely a big power difference, but there's also a big fuel economy difference. Now let's get into summing things up here with the Rebel. So first off, it rides nice on, like, just on normal roads. It feels like slightly smoother than the TRX, but once you go over bumps, that's where the TRX's suspension really shines compared to the Rebel. But the Rebel doesn't have bad suspension by any means. The Rebel's suspension's still really good. The shocks are great for the off-road. It's just not as crazy as the TRX. And I guess the best way to kind of like describe these two trucks, this feels kind of like a daily luxury-ish truck, if that makes sense, that you could take off-road. Whereas the TRX, we'll get into kind of what that feels like, but that's what this feels like, is it feels like a truck that you could, obviously, well, you for sure could daily drive, and it kind of feels like more on the luxury side, but then it also feels like it has some off-road capability, but it doesn't feel like it's an off-road truck. It definitely feels like it's an on-road truck. Let's talk about visibility before we set off here in the TRX. So first off, visibility over the hood, it's actually slightly better than the Rebel because the Rebel has that weird venting in the center portion, whereas this does not. And so you can actually see out of the hood a little bit easier. And then here's your visibility through both the mirrors. This one has blind spot monitoring. It's got the smaller mirrors. And then here's throughout the rest of the rear, which, by the way, the ram bar and the tire really don't get in the way of visibility. So yeah, overall visibility is pretty similar, other than the fact that it's actually easier to see out of the hood. And let's set off. Now, setting off here in the TRX. So this truck just feels so different compared to the, it's so weird. Like, they're both Ram 1500s and they're both off-road packages from Ram, but they feel so different. So first thing that I'm noticing with the TRX, there's definitely a lot more movement with the suspension itself. And it definitely feels like the Rebel almost feels like stiffer, whereas this definitely feels like softer. It kind of moves all over the place, which, I mean, kind of expect that with the shocks that this has with the active system. And the other thing to mention is you do feel the size difference. Like the sheer width that this truck has is crazy. So you do feel the wider track, and you also do feel the weight with the front end. The front end does feel heavier, but the wider track definitely, and the extra weight kind of doesn't get in the way as much because the wider track makes this feel a lot more stable than the Rebel. So even though this truck is a lot heavier, especially from the front end, it feels significantly more stable, and it's from the suspension to also the wider track. So like with this truck, I feel more comfortable taking it at higher speeds around corners, versus with the Rebel, I feel like the truck, it doesn't feel nearly as stable. And then with the steering, it definitely feels heavier. There's definitely a weightedness to the steering itself, and it also kind of almost feels more direct. It feels like they've kind of tuned this a little bit differently compared to the Rebel. Now I'm going to pop it over into the sport mode and the manual mode, since, well, I mean, the Rebel does have a manual setting with it, kind of. It has like the gear limiter, but it's not really the same as the manual mode in this. That just limits the gear that it'll go up into. But yeah, it's definitely not the same. And well, we got stuck at the same place, so I'll see you guys back in a second. Well, now we are turning with the TRX, and again, you can definitely feel the width. Now we're just gonna get our partial acceleration here. Obviously, you hear the supercharger whine, and the exhaust is significantly louder than the Rebel. But it doesn't mean the Rebel doesn't sound good. The Rebel still sounds good, it just doesn't sound as good. Downshift's definitely nice with the TRX. Now we're gonna be getting our full-blown acceleration here. Ooh, we got a brake warning because we accelerated towards that Raptor a little bit too fast, I guess. I mean, that shows you guys the power here of the TRX. We got a brake warning because it thinks that I was driving a little bit too fast. As I was saying here with the TRX is, yeah, the acceleration is absolutely insane. The sound is absolutely insane as well. Like, everything about this truck is just insane. But it definitely feels more sporty. And I mean, again, there's a give and take. So with the extra sporty feeling that you get with the TRX, you give up a lot of stuff. This doesn't have as high of payload. It doesn't have as high of a towing capacity. It's not as practical from a fuel economy standpoint. I mean, right now I have about 3/4 of a tank and I have 184 miles of range. Like, it's not the greatest from a fuel economy perspective, obviously. And so you give up some stuff, but with the stuff you give up, you get that, which I definitely think it's worth it if you're wanting a sporty truck. But if you want a truck that's going to tow well and you're going to take it off-road occasionally, then this isn't the truck for you, especially with just the sheer cost of everything that's associated with this truck and the loss of practicality you get. And so I think it really just depends on what you're looking for. And I think that this is probably going to offend some people. I think that most people that are going out and buying TRXs really don't need a TRX and they shouldn't buy a TRX. I think that they're just wanting it for the looks and obviously, you know, the Hellcat engine and all that, which is okay. But like realistically, this truck is this crazy off-roading machine that's this crazy performance truck. And so if you're not going to drive this in a performance setting and you're not going to take it off-road, I would rather just save the $30,000 and get a Rebel. And if you want a little bit more off-road capability, upgrade the suspension. But yeah, I love the TRX. Obviously I bought one, but I understand it's kind of a niche product. I understand where it sits. And I guess kind of summing up my thoughts between the two trucks, obviously, again, I bought the TRX, but if I was looking at this from a practicality standpoint, the Rebel is the more practical vehicle and it's significantly less money. So I guess the brain would buy the Rebel, but the heart would buy the TRX. Now that is going to sum things up for our video doing the driving comparison between this Rebel and this TRX. And you guys can obviously see they do drive quite a bit different, but it really just depends on what you're looking for. Obviously the Rebel's more practical with the better fuel economy, the higher towing capacity, the higher payload capacity and all that. But like from a driving perspective, the TRX is like this crazy fun sports truck, whereas this is just like a really normal truck, but then it still like looks really cool on the outside. So it really just depends on what you're looking for. But what I did want to say is just a huge shout out and thank you again to the Dodge Ram here in Sandy for giving me some time with this Rebel. Check out the inventory link below. I'll see all of you in the next video.